Good morning. I'm so grateful for this invitation to be with you as your preacher and presider this morning. Our lives are connected in so many ways. As I now live in Connecticut, I'm the Associate Dean and the Director of Formation at Berkeley Divinity School at Yale in New Haven. After 30 years of being a rector in an inner-city parish and a suburban parish, much like yours, I now have this wonderful chapter of my life to be teaching leadership and formation to our students. And we at Berkeley owe you, in this parish, such a debt of thanks, because you have formed and given opportunities to Berkeley students for so long, and you're one of these premier parishes that all the students race to interview with because they want to be here. And it has so much to do with you, the parish and the laity, that influence and shape and form our students. So Marcella, I know that you are really enjoying Marcella, and she loves being here with you. And so she's one of the connections. Whitney Edwards, your former rector, is so active as an alum at Berkeley and leads many initiatives there. And then your former rector, John Branson, has followed me in a parish in New Hampshire now in retirement, where he spends August at Emmanuel Church in Dublin, New Hampshire with his wife Judith. So there's all these wonderful ways that our lives are connected. So I thank you for having me be here this morning. Remaining seated, let us begin in prayer. O God, in the stillness of this worship, may we grow more sure of you. You are often closest to us when we feel you have forgotten us. The toil and busyness of daily life leaves us little time to think of you. But though we may forget you, you never forget us. So now, as we withdraw from everything without, may we find you anew within. Let our faith reconsecrate everything in our life as a sacrament of love, and lead us to meet you now where we may have missed you before. Amen. I'm aware that you are in the midst of change as a parish, and having been through many of the kinds of transitions you're in the middle of, I want to say a word of encouragement to all of you as you have said goodbye to clergy and will have people like me coming Sunday after Sunday, and then an interim and a call to the new rector, to just remind you that it is really you, the people of the parish, that constitute the life of a parish. That with all respect to clergy, we come and go. And it is the people of the parish and what you decide to do for the people outside these walls that constitutes your life together here. So I want to be encouraging of your life as the laity, of your prayer, of your involvement during this time of transition. So often the church is the place that we come to for rest, for refueling, for reflection, and the idea that we come to a church that's in the middle of a transition can often be difficult, but it's also a time to take your life of faith more seriously. To not be looking so much to a leader to shape it in your parish, but to decide, I'm going to use this time of transition in this parish to let God be the center of my life, perhaps in a way that God hasn't been before. The laity, for me, have always been the foundation of the church. When I began my work, I don't know what I would have done without the laity that served beside me. When I was in a suburban church, we did an enormous building project and trying to figure out how to lead through conflict, how to find all the skills that we needed to accomplish this vision and this big project that we had. Or then when I was in the inner city and I didn't know the language of so many of the people that were there, the way the laity have been the most faithful people in my life to show me how to do communities of faith, how to pray together, how to work through things together, how to grow and thrive. I think for me it probably started this respect for the laity and how important it was to me with my father. I grew up in the Presbyterian church in Minnesota, and my father was a contractor, a carpenter first, and then he ran a general contracting business. But he was the one that when the pastor went on vacation, they always asked him to preach. And then people would come up to me and say, you know, your dad can preach a lot better than our pastor. He actually talks about daily life. He actually talks about things that happen all week long outside the walls of the church. And then my dad, like many of you, ran the youth group and had all kinds of roles in the church. So for me, as I was being trained and went through seminary and was following this particular avenue of a call, I have always had so much respect for the people of God that fill the pews and fill the schoolrooms and boardrooms and classrooms and kitchens all week long, trying to follow the teachings of Jesus in everything that you do. Today, following our worship here together, I've been asked to talk about a book that I wrote after about 15 or 20 years of serving as rector in parishes. I found that it was the stories of lay people's prayer lives that had been so inspiring to me that I wrote a book called You Are Already Praying, Stories of God at Work. And we're going to be talking about that in a forum this morning for any of you who would like to come and talk about that. It's the book highlights architects, doctors, lawyers, plumbers, hospital, food service workers, and tells the story of how throughout their daily life they are making this attempt to live as faithful Christians in what they do during their daily life. And when we look at Thessalonians, this idea that we are to pray without ceasing, or we look at our gospel lesson this morning from Luke, where Jesus is telling the disciples to pray always, and then he gives them an idea of what that might look like. And he tells the story of this judge, he calls him an unjust judge, who listens to the just cry of a widow over and over and over and does nothing about it. And then finally, when he decides to do something about the unjust widow and gives her justice, we are told, couldn't be a more human response, that he does this because he is annoyed with her. He's annoyed with her persistence. She will not stop. So the unjust judge grants her what she wants, not because what she's asking for is fair, because he had a glimmer of kindness or patience from heaven, but because as a very human judge, he got tired of listening to her and granted it to her. So Jesus is saying this is a lot like our prayer, which says to me that sometimes I try to make prayer much holier than it is. I try to sort of clean myself up for prayer, rather than if we're going to try to pray without ceasing. Think about praying without ceasing. That means prayer is going to take on many, many different shapes and forms. And it's not always going to be the pretty parts of my life. Prayer, if it's going to be something that we do always, it enters into the dilemmas, the troubles, the anxiety, the worries, the arguments, the conflicts that we face at school and in the office and at home. I want to reassure you that no one I have ever met thinks they're good at praying. There's something about the nature of prayer that none of us feels like we do it enough, or we do it the right way, or the right time, or we use the right words, or we have the right attitude. If you even talk to people that spend their life in a convent or a monastery, the monks and nuns who spend a lot of time, they don't feel like they've got this down. They don't feel like, well, now that's something I'm really good at. And I say that so to be of encouragement to all of us as we try to follow this lesson in the Gospel of Luke and figure out what it might mean this week, this afternoon, if we tried to pray in everything we did. In other words, if we tried to have an attitude of opening our experience to the presence of God, whether we're at the kitchen sink, or in our yard, or with our children, or at our laptop, or on the cell phone, or here at the altar. What you do in the world all week is as important to God as the work of a priest at the altar. Mary Oliver, someone told me between services that John Branson, your former rector, loved Mary Oliver, and so you know of this poet. She has a very short little poem, it's called Praying, that describes something of what I'm trying to get at in inviting all of us to think of our prayer as something that we keep simple and do regularly. She writes, "It doesn't have to be the blue iris. It could be weeds in a vacant lot. Just patch a few words together and don't make them elaborate. This isn't a contest, but a doorway into thanks and a silence in which another voice may speak." So as you go through this transition in your parish, I congratulate you on putting your children front and center today, to let the liveliness and the life that they bring in to the worship to be important to all of you. You will be in my prayers as you continue to grow and thrive and see where God might be calling you together as a parish. And whenever God calls us together to something new that strengthens our life, it's almost always because there's some need in the world that God is calling us to meet. Amen.